I'll just be there. Oh, your coworkers. Yes, you'll take care of that.
Start to be at 5, I guess.
Okay.
Yes, of course.
All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, can you guys hear me? Oh, my little mic should be on. I don't know if you can hear me loudly enough. I'll try to speak more clearly. So thank you all for coming back for this this patient advocacy session. I think if those of you who've been coming to this event for the last 9 years, I think that many of the talks and many of the things we're seeing and much of the involvement of industry speaks to the fact that we're at a very different place with RNA biology than we were a decade ago. That we're really actually, I think, at an inflection point in the ways in which we approach medicine development and therapeutic development, especially in the space of genetic disease. You know, that makes it both a really exciting time, but also a time where I think it's important to remember that this is not just about the science, but it is about the people and the patients. I'm a clinician scientist, and although I love studying repeat elements in the genome just because they're incredibly cool from a purely biological perspective, I'm reminded every time I go to clinic that there is a patient that I care for who have diseases for which we have nothing that we can offer in terms of something that will change the natural history of their condition. But I view those people as my partners in the process by which we are going to work forward towards development of those treatments. And so we're inviting the partners actually to be part of our conversation today, because I think if we don't, we're actually missing one of the key perspectives on how to approach these problems. So with that, I'm going to allow my co-director to introduce herself, and then allow our panel to introduce themselves, and we'll get going with some hopefully insightful thoughts.
Awesome. Well, my name is Beth Ames, and I am a pediatric and adult geneticist here at the University of Michigan. I am also a member of the Rare Disease Advisory Council, and I think very much like Peter, you know, I definitely am guilty of nerding out about science, but at the same time, seeing patients really brings that, I like to say, like, the technicolor to my job and adding meaning to what we're doing. So it's really great that we have these voices sort of joining everything that you've heard today. And then in terms of our panelists, if you guys want to take 2 to 3 minutes to introduce yourselves, and then we have some prepared questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's great to be with you all. My name is Jason Morgan, and I am very proud to be a state representative for the state of Michigan. We are in my district currently. I represent downtown Ann Arbor, most of the University of Michigan campus, up to a little bit of Oakland and Wayne counties. But I'm also I'm both a tireless advocate for folks living with rare diseases, as well as someone who lives with a rare disease. I live with Becker's muscular dystrophy, a neuromuscular disease that impacts all of your muscles. If you are all scientists, you've probably heard of muscular dystrophy, but it is something that I was diagnosed with at a young age, and generally told that my prognosis was pretty bleak. That the average life expectancy for Becker's MD is sometime in your 40s. Many people do live longer, and so I'm very hopeful of that, but that you'd likely lose your ability to walk sometime in your mid-20s. And I'm very fortunate to be 35 today and still walking and running, and incredibly fortunate to be where I am today. But it's something that is the reason that I'm in politics. It's the reason I ran for office and do the work that I do today, because I learned from a very young age that my time might be shorter than others. And I want to do good work with whatever time I have. And I'm fortunate that the last 15 years of working in government and politics has been incredibly successful so far. And I feel like I've been able to move the needle on a lot of things. We'll talk about the Rare Disease Advisory Council a little bit later, but I'm just glad to be able to do this work and really thankful to all of you who are doing the hard work of trying to help people with diseases and cure folks who really need it. So I'll leave it there, but just to say that I'm in my second term in the State House and just appreciate all of you and happy to be here today.
So everyone, didn't know we were doing 2-3 minutes, so let's see if I can make this long. I'm sure I can. But I'm Sean Dorr, 35, live in Monroe, Michigan. Here as a member of the Rare Disease Advisory Council. I'm sure you hear that a lot of commonalities between us. Very glad that the legislation was starting to be pushed forward so we could be like a lot of other states and really invest in our rare disease patients. With that being said, I have a rare disease called Pompe disease, which is a lysosomal storage disease. Also, glycogen storage disease type 2 is the scientific name. Diagnosed when I was 28, very common to go through a diagnostic journey of decades, more than just years. But it took me 15 years. And so for the past 7 years, I've been advocating for this disease, better care, better treatment. We are blessed as a rare disease to have enzyme replacement therapy. We now have 3 options technically, which is just amazing. But I know with RNA, not only does it help me know my specific gene mutations to hopefully better plan out my prognosis of life, but also with therapies. We have gene therapy in the pipeline, but we also have an RNA in a phase 1-2 clinical trial now. So I'm here not only to share my experience, but also be a bridge to help make things better, help me learn as well. So thank you for having me here.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Spencer, and I'm also here on behalf of the Michigan Rare Disease Advisory Council. But I'm also here for a very deep personal reason. My mom has Huntington's disease. She's in the final stage, currently in hospice, and one of my younger siblings is in early symptomatic. So I have very much an interest in the RNA. We've been following it in our patient community. I do have experience in the biotechnology. That's my professional experience, mostly in commercial. I did recently complete my Master's of Science in Regulatory Affairs. So I have an understanding of not just what's needed to the patient community, but also the trials and tribulations and actually the successes of bringing these therapies from bench to bedside.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Locke. I was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis at the age of 2 at the University of Michigan. So those of you that don't know what CF is, it's a genetic condition that primarily affects the lungs and the pancreas. When I was diagnosed in 1994, it was mostly an adolescent disease. It was very rare for children to live to or past the age of 30. So I knew from a young age that I may not be around as long as everyone around me, and that kind of made me angry, and I wanted to do something about it. So as soon as I was pretty much eligible and found out about research studies, I got involved as often as I was able to participate. I was involved in the research studies that helped bring Trikafta to the United States, which has been a huge medical advancement for those with cystic fibrosis. We are now living into our adulthood, and the median age is into the 60s in 2025, which is fantastic. I would like to highlight my doctors at the University of Michigan, Dr. Nasser, Dr. Sisson, Dr. Sagana, Dr. D. Cardenas, and Dr. Lynch, who all aided in research towards my disease. I also was the first CFer to undergo a procedure for Zephyr pulmonary valves. That procedure is rare to be performed for those with cystic fibrosis, but has since been approved for those with emphysema and COPD, which I am ecstatic about. And I'm currently spending my time dedicated to medical science and research, continuing to volunteer with a medical advisory board and participate in events such as this to spread more awareness for cystic fibrosis and medical science.
So we, prior to our panel today, divided up the questions. So the first question will be for Ashley and Donna. And could you please share your experience with you or your family members' current treatment options and what challenges you have faced in sort of navigating the disease process?
Well, at the moment, I am post double lung transplant. I had an emergent double lung transplant in 2019. And around that same time, I was also diagnosed with gastroparesis and diabetes due to CF progressing. I don't do nearly as many treatments as I used to. Growing up, I would spend upwards of 6 hours a day in total being mostly stationary while I did breathing treatments and airway clearance due to the buildup of mucus in my lungs. It was hard for a child to stay still back then, but thankfully, as computers and video games become more commonplace, that time was passed a lot easier. I experienced a multitude of challenges through the years, which include lung collapses, repeated pneumonia infections, repeated ER and ICU stays, and a lot of uncertainty with my disease. These days, I only take a multitude of medication in pill form that include anti-rejection, steroids, allergies, vitamins, mood stabilizers, and some things here and there that help with what my body is missing. I also manage my diabetes and gastroparesis with insulin monitors and patches, paying better attention to my diet and exercising when I can. And I actually began going to the gym for the first time this year, which has been fantastic. Yeah, my medical routine definitely looks a lot different than it used to. And the technology behind cystic fibrosis airway clearance is definitely a lot different than it has been since the 90s and 2000s. So.
Huntington's disease is a relentless neurodegenerative genetic disorder that profoundly impacts not only those diagnosed, but the families and the community. Characterized by a triad of motor dysfunction, cognitive decline, and psychiatric disturbances, HD presents a complex landscape for management. While there is currently no cure that halts or reverses the progression of the disease, several treatment options aim to alleviate the symptoms and improve the quality of life. Emerging research into RNA-based therapies and gene editing offer a glimmer of hope. These innovative approaches aim to target the disease at its genetic roots, holding the potential to alter its course fundamentally. While these are still in development and come with their own set of challenges and ethical considerations, they represent the relentless pursuit of a future where Huntington's disease can be effectively managed or even cured.
So our next question is for Sean, and maybe with a little follow-up from Donna, although you added a little bit of what you just said to this question, which is, in a world of sort of potential for RNA-based therapies, what are your hopes and what are your concerns about this sort of technology and its potential applications?
So compared to what I currently have for treatment now, I would say there is just a ton of hope for RNA and what could mean to Pompe patients like myself. Right now, I am on enzyme replacement therapy, which every other week I get 20 milligrams a kilogram of a dextrose mixed solution through IV. Have a nurse come to my house about 4 or 5 hours every day dedicated to this, and the plan is for the rest of my life. Could be a lot worse, could not have a treatment, but of course my body always seems to be unique in that it fights everything. So I had to go through immunosuppressants. That was fun, not really. Allergic reactions. So it took 6 months for me to be desensitized with a bunch of chemo drugs, rituximab, methotrexate, Velcade, just to bring down my antibodies so I could take the treatment. So that was not fun. The reactions themselves weren't fun. Changed to a different treatment, and as of about a month ago, I'm now having reactions again. My antibodies are low, so we're really trying to figure out what's going on. I look into the world of RNA, and not only can we have the potential to stop allergic reactions that I'm having to this medication, we have the ability to rewrite and fix the problem, whether it be my genetic deficiencies, we could correct those. We could also teach my body to start generating acid alpha glucosidase, which is what I am deficient in, what I lack. So essentially, though, with Pompe, if I don't get this addressed, usually die of respiratory failure. You can see I'm kind of out of breath just talking. It's not that I'm nervous, because I'm actually doing all right, I'd say. But yeah, I just feel like the whole world of RNA could unlock so much for my disease with Pompe. And I mean, I look at the concerns, and enzyme replacement, I had a lot more concerns on, not only, you know, on a scientific level of what could go wrong, but, you know, just the time management, not having to be tied down to an IV and have that life, that freedom would be huge to me. I'm looking at what we are having in the pipeline right now with Pompe. I think enzyme replacement, we've reached the endpoint of its usefulness. We can't cross the blood-brain barrier, which is huge. We're finding that Pompe is affecting so much of the body. Neurologically, we can't get to the brain to take that uptake. The enzyme replacement itself is very inefficient in the body. Very little of it gets to the muscle cells. So, you know, what's next? Well, we're looking at gene therapy. We're looking at vector to basically tell my body to make that enzyme again. But with RNA, there's no worry about the whole, you know, vector, and your body has antibodies to it, which I think is huge. We have one in the pipeline that is pretty much reducing substrate, making less glycogen in the body, and that is in trial now. So a whole lot of hope and a little bit of concern, I suppose. Yeah.
So my hopes are that they could halt disease progression or even slow the progression by silencing or modifying the messenger RNA. There's potential not just to halt the disease, but to reverse some of its effects. Restoring neural infection function could lead to improvements in motor skills, cognitive abilities, and emotional regulation. Ultimately, these therapies bring us closer to a cure. They represent a shift from managing symptoms to fundamentally altering the disease's trajectory. However, there are significant concerns. Entering the mRNA therapies into the body raises questions about long-term therapy, because you are born with the mutant gene, and the genes may have altered to support that gene or be a part of that gene's process. And if you change that mutant gene, what are going to be the consequences? Are we going to create other diseases, or long-term, what could be the consequences? So while I'm very hopeful, I'm cautiously optimistic, I guess is the best way to put it.
That's a very astute comment, actually. So I have a kind of a follow-up related to what you just said, because I was recently at this, or involved with the Packard ALS meeting, and they've recently completed the ongoing secondary stage of the tofersen medication, which is an ASO. And they're actually for the first time seeing improvements in the ALS rating scale in patients. So, which I don't think any of us would have predicted would have happened. So the possibility of improvement is, I think, possible. I think we're still a long ways, but I think it's possible.
Yeah, I've been following the RNA science. We make the joke that it's great to see that the science has finally gotten from the fruit flies and monkeys into the humans. So it is very promising. But yeah, we still have a long way to go.
All right, we're gonna pivot, and we have a question for Representative Morgan. And if you want to elaborate or give a short answer, that's either is great. But what strategies or actions are being considered to enhance our state's investment in research and development of RNA-based therapies, or more broadly, other types of therapies for rare diseases?
Well, thank you for that. And the first step, in my opinion, has been to establish the Rare Disease Advisory Council. This was created through the Department of Health and Human Services under Governor Whitmer last year. And this is generally the result of legislation that I've been working on for the last couple of years to officially create the Rare Disease Advisory Council on an ongoing basis in the state, regardless of who is governor. So we're good for the next 2 years, but we've still got to get legislation passed to solidify that, to make sure that it continues on going forward as well. But that was a huge first step. The state of Michigan right now does very little and nowhere near enough to support research and particularly for rare diseases. And the first step of this council is to try and elevate that conversation and make sure that the state is paying attention. With that said, there's also been a growing amount of engagement from the bio and pharmaceutical industry with state leaders over the last couple of years to make the case, not just for the science behind what folks are doing, but the economic case for the state. We should be a leader in developing cures for diseases here in our state. The University of Michigan is the leading research institution in the country, if not the world, in my opinion. And I think there's actually data out there that backs that up, but I don't care if there is or not. I think it is. U of M is actually the reason I live in Ann Arbor. This is where I first came for treatment of muscular dystrophy and fell in love with this place and this community of folks who are doing this life-saving work. So we're going to make the economic case to policymakers in Lansing. We're going to have incredible advocates officially giving guidance to the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, to legislators, and to the governor on the needs of rare diseases and the potential that is there for us to be a leader as a state. And we're going to elevate the conversation. That has been my goal as somebody who is one of the few elected officials in the country, I believe, living with particularly Becker's muscular dystrophy. But it's not just about one disease, it's about all of them. And it's about the life-changing work that mRNA research and all of the technology that you are working on can have. So trying to elevate that conversation. We're doing a little bit, nowhere near enough. We need to do more.
This question is kind of for the whole panel, but I think an issue that we often hear is that patients often feel unempowered or a lack of empowerment in their own disease and helpment of their disease. What kinds of things as clinicians and scientists can we do to work with you and to help empower and engage with patients and patient groups and advocacy groups?
I would say for starters, including them in on the dialogue where appropriate, and making sure that they're understanding the MR. Sorry, asthma's at its worst right now. But yeah.
Do you want us to, I'll jump in here, and just add that okay, good, she has one. Showing up and engaging in Lansing, engaging in the spaces where we have economic development folks, we have public health folks, we have elected officials. I promise you that most elected officials do not know the full extent or even a little bit of what all of our scientists are doing here in our state. I feel I considered going into biochemistry because I wanted to help cure diseases, and then I took AP Bio and said this is not my calling. So I appreciate all of you who can do that work. I have found this is maybe the way I can help. But the thing that I've tried to do is just try and elevate voices into the conversation and show up and speak on our House floor and raise awareness so that everybody in the legislature, at the very least, they know somebody who lives with a rare disease. And they know somebody who is talking about this pretty incessantly. I just never give up talking about it because they need to have it top of mind. So I think showing up, being present, and engaging in that conversation is a really big part of that.
You want me or you? I'll go. Okay. So I will say my perspective might be a little interesting is diagnosed at age 12 with type 1 diabetes, and it's not a rare disease. I took it, I accepted it. We accepted whatever therapy we had. I'm on an insulin pump, cool, whatever. And then I got my diagnosis with Pompe disease, and the time has just flown by. It's been 7 years, and I feel so empowered because as a rare disease patient, I feel like people want to hear my story. My doctors are interested, pharma's interested. We have organizations, we get together, we learn. It's such an interesting ecosystem, and I think Pompe is one of those where I feel like we are at that synergy where academia, pharma, advocacy, it's all together in one. I'm on multiple patient advisory boards. You know, your opinion matters, and I think that when you have that almost round table, that synergy is huge. My geneticist I see, he doesn't tell me how I'm supposed to be feeling. He tells me, or he asks me, you know, what do you need from me? Or I say, hey, I've read about this new therapy in the pipeline, this, you know, PubMed publication. What do you think about that? And I love it because he stays engaged with it. I stay engaged with it. He validates my thoughts, but I also validate his. And I think it's a back and forth. And I think that having that open mind where you might be the expert, but I'm also the expert too. Because my fiance sitting there, she thinks she knows what Pompe is, or I think she tries to understand, but she'll really never even know. Doctors won't know. Only I know. And it's one of those things where I have to communicate it the best, and everyone around me has to learn because as much as you want to understand it, you don't. And so I think with rare diseases, everyone needs to have that learning collaboration because with my disease, it's so progressive. I don't even know what is Pompe sometimes. And I have to ask others around me, am I walking different? Is my gait different? Have you noticed I struggle with this more? Because I've been living with this. So it's kind of, you know, the moon only shines because of the sun. It's all an ecosystem, and we all need to be in this together in order to create effective therapies and treatments, is we all need to have a seat at the table. So I felt like I was really on a soapbox with that one, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely to piggyback on that. I have always been a big preacher of communication and collaboration. Ever since I was young, I've asked a lot of questions, maybe annoyingly so. And he mentioned, you know, having kind of a rare, progressive, genetic, terminal disease. It kind of brings, you know, a certain attention from your care team. I've found growing up, it was definitely a back and forth collaboration where growing up, you know, they had to tell me what to do and how to get it done. And, you know, me being a kid, I was defiant or whatever the case was. But growing up and realizing my health was something I needed to take seriously, I made it a point to let my care team know, like, I'm taking this seriously and you need to take me seriously as well. And ever since I buckled down and, like really started learning, like what does my body do? What does this disease do? How does it affect me versus other people? And understanding the development of science that's currently going into CF and the new trials, the new research, all of that stuff, I communicate with my team about, and it's become a lot more of a collaborative effort. Just paying attention and listening is the main thing. And he mentioned as well that the care team gives you a special attention sometimes because you have kind of a unique story. I make a joke that they give me extra attention because I'm one of their most successful science experiments. So I definitely, let them know what's going on with me. And in return, we have that mutual respect that they communicate with me when things, if I have to be more serious, if I have to, pay attention to something and things like that. So communication and collaboration is the biggest tool in the medical setting that I think should be utilized by everyone.
All right, so another question is, and this is sort of thinking about when you've participated in clinical trials or contemplated new therapies, as you're, in the seat of a patient considering those therapies, um, what ethical considerations do you think of, and what should, the scientific community be also considering from your perspective?
We'll try this again. First and foremost, informed consent and patient autonomy. When talking to the patient, it should be jargon-free and it should be clear. The information should be clear. The patient shouldn't be felt to, or shouldn't be coerced into a decision. They should be happy with their decision. It should be an educated one, and they should have the option to withdraw at any time. Second would be the safety and long-term effects. We know that they're not fully understood, so implement rigorous preclinical studies and phase clinical trials to monitor short and long-term conditions, and continue to monitor those should the therapy come to market. Have a way of tracking that information and ensure the patient safety. Third, and I find this to be very important, genetic privacy and data protection. It's personal and sensitive. So we need to ensure robust data encryption and limit access to authorized personnel only, complying with the regulations like GDPR and HIPAA. And patients should know how their data is being used, if it's going to be used in secondary research purposes, and offered an option out if they get uncomfortable with sharing their data. Of course, we need regulatory oversight and compliance, which is very important to engage with the FDA and the EMA early in the development process and seek approvals at each phase. And again, establish long-term follow-up studies and reporting systems for adverse effects. And last but not least, and I already did kind of cover this, managing the hype and expectations. Avoid overpromising. It can lead to false hope and disappointment. Communicate the current state of research honestly, highlighting limitations and uncertainties. Keeping in mind, sensationalism can skew public perception, so there's also a need to work with journalists to ensure accurate and balanced coverage of the RNA-based therapies. That's very important in the network as well.
I think Donna said it really well, especially with the informed consent patient autonomy. I think what I've experienced in the Pompe world, since the disease is so varied between patients. I mean, you have me where if I didn't tell you, you might not know I had Pompe. I walk fine, I look fine. We have patients in wheelchairs, on ventilators that require a ton of assistance. And we're talking a rare disease where your clinical site for a study might be halfway across the country and they reasonably expect you to be mobile enough to, you know, get on a bus, get on a plane, travel. And a lot of these considerations don't consider the wide range of mobility and things that affect people. So like in terms of building the study, not only like the transportation, the stipends, it's a lot of work for a lot of people to partake in a lot of studies. And then a lot of the times these studies are built, you know, FDA, they want to see benefit to a treatment. I'm on a treatment that's supposed to slow progression. It doesn't show benefit. You know, realistically, I'm never getting better than I was before. I'm just putting the pause button. And so these studies, a lot of the metrics that are used don't apply to everybody. I can walk for 6 minutes. There's a 6-minute walk test, which don't get me started. I think it's a horrible test, but a 6-minute walk test is like the gold standard for Pompe, and it's kind of not all inclusive. You know, we have people going, well, how do I participate when I can't even do 2 steps? I'm in a wheelchair. So I think ethically, I think that's a huge thing is, you know, how do you represent a whole community? And of course, every different disease is different, but I think the study design should definitely involve patient input. You know, it goes back to that previous question of collaboration. You know, let's get somewhere together. What you want to achieve is what we want to achieve. How do we get there the best? Of course, how do we get regulatory approval? But in terms of ethics, have your patient at the table. They're not subject number one, they're a patient. And I think ethically, that is the best thing you can do is have the patient be in that vehicle driving the car with you. So.
So I want to take a moment to ask a question of my fellow panelist leader here. You know, Dr. Ames, you've taken care of a lot of patients with pediatric genetic conditions, many rare conditions, and you've been involved in clinical trials for some of those patients. Some of which have been successful, some of which have not. So what do you sort of see as the barriers as the clinician? Because I think many scientists just assume that once they get this thing figured out, then it'll just all happen magically at the clinical side. And I think we know that's probably not the case. So what do you view as the barriers on that clinical side that the scientists and the biopharmaceutical companies should be thinking about as they kind of think about these things?
That is a great question. I think that I think coming actually back to the theme that we've heard before about communication is huge. And so when a clinician is sort of approached about participating, basically leading a clinical trial at a site, either you know through a biotech company or another investigator, I think open communication and setting expectations is really critical. And then being open and honest if things are going differently than expected, especially at different sites. You know, so I know what's happening with the patients that I am treating, but what's happening at other sites is sometimes a little bit of a black box. And so if things are being done differently or not going well at other sites, you know, it's one, good to know if I can improve what we're doing here, or you know, if there are things that I need to be looking out for, like infusion reactions or other adverse effects. I think when I talk to families about a new diagnosis and whether they would be eligible for clinical trials, I think there's this balance of families wanting to feel like they are doing everything for their child, but then wondering if this is the right therapy, like if this is the one, or if this will be something, especially I think with concerns about gene therapy, where if they get one and it doesn't work, what are they left with in terms of treatment options for their child or for themselves? And so I think many times those are the questions that patients ask me about like clinical trials and about new therapies.
So I had another question for Representative Morgan. It's going to be a hard question, so I'm sorry. We're at a politically weird time with science. I'm not speaking as a representative of the University of Michigan. I have to state that legally. But I just wonder, as a group of scientists and people working in biopharma and those spaces, what kinds of things should we be thinking about in the face of what's going on if we believe that science is important and we need to be advocates for it? What do you recommend as somebody who's actually in this space? We hear call your senator. I guess I often don't know how I feel about that as my answer. So what are your thoughts and recommendations?
Right, just a small question there. Nothing major going on in the world or anything in that space. No, it's a really depressing and scary time for science. I think this is the worst it has ever been in terms of there being a concerted effort to demonize science as this somehow a bad thing, when folks are literally saving lives and curing diseases and coming up with life-changing technologies for treatments. I mean, so many of us rely on this. Every American, everybody in the world relies on the work that is being done in the research and science industry. And we had a prior administration that I think was making some of the biggest strides in a positive direction, really investing in research, really investing in trying to solve the world's biggest problems and putting the financial resources behind it and partnering with institutions of higher ed and partnering with scientists who are doing that work. And now we're at a time when just a few words in your application for a grant that you submitted a couple years ago and that's been underway can put everything on hold and on pause. And as you all know, I mean, once you start a clinical trial, you have to keep that going, and some of those are long trials. Those are things you can't just stop and restart. And those are the things that are leading to this life-changing research. So it's a really scary time. I will say the calls to legislators, federal legislators in particular in this arena, and to the White House, they are making a difference. They do matter. I haven't always felt that way. I was a congressional staffer for 5 different members of Congress. And I didn't always love being on the other end of those phone calls when people would call and they'd be really angry and you'd get thousands of calls a week. But they also weren't always effective because it depended on the issue. The one thing I will say is that the administration in Washington right now, they do worry about people being mad at them. I know it doesn't seem like it, but they do. They're very sensitive, despite the fact they try and say that they're not. Members of Congress and senators do care. They might not care if one person calls. One call isn't going to necessarily change the world, but 10 calls, 100 calls, 1,000 calls, that does change how they view something. It makes a difference. And I promise you, they can't escape it if 1,000 people are calling every week. And I believe that's actually thousands and tens of thousands currently calling Senate offices. But if you watch very carefully, an order going out, doing something terrible, and then a couple days later, some of them get kind of pulled back or clarified. That's not because they've changed their mind necessarily. It's because there's pushback on that. So every attempt to roll something back can benefit from people contacting their legislators. And when you have legislators who are very supportive, so our Congresswoman here is Debbie Dingell. I was just with her at a 1,000+ person town hall last night, and I'm seeing her, I saw her this morning, I'm seeing her later this evening after this. She is fighting like crazy for us. But it does help her when people are calling saying that they're supporting the things that she's fighting for. I think she was doing some roundtables with federal workers and researchers who had their research projects put on hold earlier today, and some federal workers who were laid off. So she's spending her time trying to lift up those stories and tell the stories of, it's not just the science, it's the people that you're helping with that science. That's what we have to be telling the stories of. Somebody can feel like they want to demonize a federal worker or some theoretical fancy researcher, but when they think about who that is benefiting, to be clear, I love researchers, so that's not how I feel. But it's reminding them that your grandparents, their cancer was cured by a researcher. Their heart medication is the result of researchers who found treatments for these types of illnesses. It's reminding people of the human stories of who is being helped by this really critical work that you're all doing. And I think that's really important to be sharing out there in the media, at town halls, with your congresspeople, with your senators, to the White House, and making sure that you don't just give up and accept that it's going to be what it. Debbie and I often would get frustrated and say, it is what it is. Well, it's not what it is right now. We can make a difference. And so there is still a lot of work. It's worth making the calls, I guess, is the answer I would give you more succinctly.
We are approaching the last 10 minutes, and we've gotten through many of the questions. I guess one question mainly for Ashley and for Donna, but if anyone wants to chime in, what types of educational initiatives would be helpful or are needed to increase the awareness of understanding things like RNA biomedicine to patients, to other doctors, and to the general public?
Well, I'll be honest and say that I didn't know a whole lot about RNA before I was asked to be on this panel, but I did do quite a lot of looking into, what it is. I paid attention to all of these wonderful speakers that you've had here today, and honestly, uh, the biggest thing that I can continue to come back to is communication and collaboration. Events like this is a huge, step in getting that awareness out, getting education and people that are genuinely interested in, what's going on with the science and the medical and everything with the world the way that it is right now. Just understanding what's going on, like in this little section of the world, events like this, going online, communicating with your, friends, family, care teams, anything to just kind of continuing to get the knowledge and awareness of what these therapies are and how they can help people in my community and the rare disease community in general.
So of course, we should always start with the patient, empowering the patient through accessible information. But let's face it, sometimes the patient just isn't ready. So then next we go to our healthcare providers. And in my perfect little bubble, I am confident that scientists are collaborating with our clinicians to take the science from the lab into clinical practice. So if you disagree, stay out of my bubble. But of course, educating these clinicians through CME programs, your medical conferences, scientific congresses is always a big help. But I think what's more important is educating the general public so that they know, understand. putting the education content in schools and university through curriculum integration, identify misconceptions about RNA therapy, and with these engage the respected scientists. I grew up in a generational farm, and I can tell you when my mom was first diagnosed, and my dad, she had a sleep problem. So they just weren't ready to hear what I had to say, and it took a while. And I still have cousins who still don't want to hear what I have to say. But interestingly enough, someone who's been helpful with my parents is their granddaughter that was in high school and started talking to them about it. And I was like, how do you know that? Why do you know that? But I think educating them early on, because let's face it, we listen to our kids, and the grandparents think that they are the best in the world. So let's educate everyone around them.
So I just wanted to give a chance if there's anybody in the audience who has questions for anybody on the panel that they wanted to ask. Beth?
It's not really a question, but as a researcher who works in lysosomal storage diseases and Huntington's disease, I just really want to thank you for sharing your story and helping to educate us. I would call us, research advocates that, work arm in arm with the patient advocates.
Yeah, and certainly as one of the co-directors of the Center for RNA Biomedicine, I want to second that, what Beth just said. But I did also have a question, and this maybe it's more a frustration that I'm going to voice. As a scientist working on RNA and advocating MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, for example, for RNA research, I've grown somewhat frustrated because while we as scientists use jargon, we also get educated in scientific communication and broader communication. I've had science cafes that I've gone to high schools and so forth to teach the kids. But obviously over time, the gap between scientists and the general public has only increased. And that's a systemic problem. It's not a problem that I can change. In fact, when, for example, the University of Michigan advocates for science, now they're viewed as elites that nobody should listen to, right? So it becomes harder and harder to bridge that gap. And I'm just curious whether there is anything we can do as scientists to, go to the communities, to communicate in ways that don't turn people off.
I'm probably going to hand it off to you in a minute, but I wanted to mention what she had mentioned before is I think that a big thing that really helps people understand, especially the general public, which can be, a little bit harder to get through to, is dispelling the myths and, the common misconceptions and stuff like that. Being able to correct maybe some of those misconceptions in a way that gets people thinking rather than here's all of the information, do with it, interpret it how you will. Really making that kind of an interactive thing, asking questions and, really dispelling a lot of those myths can help get through to a lot of people that are kind of against that wall.
Yeah, I'll chime in real quick too. I think you really have to target your audience. Let's face it, I think in this day and age, people either want to hear it or they don't want to hear it. And you're not going to change that. But, for those that are interested, as you were talking, I was thinking, if you came down to one of our Facebook groups for Pompeii and said, hey, I researched this and that, oh man, we'd be an open book for you. That's the audience. We're here, we're all about it. But even having resources online, if you have a web page, a blog, a YouTube channel, there's so many channels that are out there that you're putting it out there, you're putting the facts, you're putting what you want to share. Could be a two-way communication, but at least a one-way where it's getting out there, it's being shared. I don't think it's in vain, and I totally encourage that.
At the risk of oversimplifying something, I think a lot about, to your question, I think about there's an episode of Parks and Recreation, which is the TV show I watch to like keep myself sane when things are not ideal in the political world, about fluoride in the water. And there's like this big sugar company that wants to put sugar in the water instead. And there's this whole campaign they try and do about Flow H2O or something like that, where they're trying to make this like fun campaign about why it's cool to have like fluoride in your water. And there's this like competing thing where they want to create this energy drink that's gonna instead just put like this sugar in the water. It's gonna taste good and be cool as well. There's this whole back and forth. In some respects, it's frustrating that a lot of the most important work of science is shared through like research papers. The average person is never going to read that. I mean, I literally go on like, on the rare occasion that I get a vacation, I'll take like research documents and things and actually read them on the plane. That's the only time I have to like really dig into stuff. But in today's modern world, it really is like social media and like TikTok and like trying to boil a wildly complex idea down to a like 60-second video, that is really that's some of the only ways to really get through to people today. Simplifying a thought down very simply or making it fun or interesting or creative. Basically, Jon Stewart making the news more creative and like funny and interesting. Those types of things, which to be honest with you, I think kind of suck because I'm not creative. I'm a policy wonk. I don't want to be making like cutesy videos and things like that for social media. I want to be writing legislation and working on difficult public policy to solve problems. But my understanding has become that the avenue or the path to doing the work that you want to do is that you have to find these ways to connect with people where they're at. And at the moments when they're paying attention to whatever that particular issue is that they're paying attention to. But it might mean scientists partnering with young folks. I'm often mistaken as a younger folk than I am. I'm 35, but and I missed the whole TikTok generation. Like it wasn't my jam, but I'm trying my best because I think that that's the way to get really important information to people that need to hear it.
I would just like to add,
Sorry, let's just, last question.
I just wanted to express, many of us what we feel. You are our real heroes because you have given us the meaning of our life, what we are doing back in the laboratories. Now we have more meaning we could see. So give overcoming your anger, depression, frustration and all that. If you can face us and give this much information, that gives us a reason to go back and do what we want to do, even more, and not worrying about what's going on in the politics and so on. So you are our real heroes. Thank you very much.
So I think that's a great last comment to end on. And I just want to thank our entire panel. I agree with that last comment completely. You are an inspiration, not just to the scientists, but to the clinicians that you see, the people that you work with. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time and coming and talking to us today. Thank you. So I think now we're moving to, do you want to tell everybody what we're doing?
We're gonna jump in right to some more talk. So hang tight while we switch over.